Hello and welcome to GameBabble. I'm your host, Jell. I'm not exactly a big fan of Sony, but one thing I do like about the PS3 is the ability to make a Japanese PSN account, log on to the Japanese PlayStation Store, and buy Japanese PlayStation games, including old PS1 titles. Heck, Rakugaki Showtime damn well nearly single-handedly justifies the purchase of a PS3. Although that's due to the fact that it generally retails for about $300, but hey! But today's episode is not about a PS1 game, but rather an arcade port recently released on the PlayStation Network. Dark Awake, The King Has No Name. A fantasy-themed fighter created by Korean developer Eolith, makers of KOF 2001 and 2002, some say that Dark Awake actually began development before even KOF 2001. Regardless, with its Japanese arcade release in 2004 under the title Chaos Breaker, the game stands as Eolith's final game and their only original fighter, serving sort of as their magnum opus, showing what the company could do when given free reign over the development of a fighter and not held back by existing characters and IP. So why have you never heard of it? Well, that's because it looks like this. Yeah, with pre-rendered sprites that would have looked dated in 1994, let alone 2004, and early footage looking sluggish and clunky, not many people in America gave a shit. However, it did gain a cult following in Japan. Still, it didn't receive a home release until just a few weeks ago, where it was released on the PlayStation Network under its original in-development title of Dark Awake, The King Has No Name. And with my 360 red ringing and in the shop, and, well, I can't resist a new fighter, I decided to check it out of morbid curiosity, and holy crap! This is actually pretty good. The controls are incredibly tight, it moves along at a decently fast pace, faster than your average KOF, about Neo Geo Battle Coliseum speed, and this is actually pretty good. The story is something about the gods stealing a copy of King of Dragons and masturbating. I don't know, it's a fucking fighter, who cares about the plot? Point is, you pick a team of 3 characters, KOF style. Then the default teams are divided up by race. There's a human team, an elf team, a dark elf team, a dwarf team, an undead team, and a horde team. This not only gives us an incredibly varied character roster, but an even split between good and quote-unquote evil characters. And I really like this. While these characters may be Western fantasy cliches we've seen a million times before, how often have you actually played as them in a fighter? I mean, how often do you get a chance to be a necromancer and a fighter? Heck, you can actually make a team that consists entirely of evil sorcerers. That's badass. Also, it's worth noting that 2 of the character designs, the human mains, were changed for the home release. In the Japanese arcade release Chaos Breaker, Ramda had spiky hair, and Sandra looked more like Cassandra from Soul Calibur. That said, you can get their original arcade designs by holding select while picking the characters. I can only assume the designs were changed because these were probably their original intended designs and they were changed to appeal to a Japanese audience. Whatever the case, after picking your 3 characters, you're then introduced to the game's biggest gimmick, the item system. There's a wide variety of different items, and after picking your 3 characters, you get to pick 1 item. Each item has a limited number of uses, often recharging between rounds, and some items, like equipment items, automatically boost stats just by having them. But all items have their own unique item super performed by doing a quarter circle forward and pressing the item button. Also, one other interesting gimmick is that as you beat opponents, you gain more items, and you can actually swap out team members on your team in order to equip more items. So you could actually do 2-on-2 with 2 items, or have 1 character using 3 items. It's kinda odd, and one has to wonder how viable this strategy would be, but it's something that would be fun to experiment around with. While combat is handled KOF style with no tagging, you can call in your partners for assists at the cost of 1 super meter. Aside from that, the game plays incredibly well, and I was very surprised with it. Again, the controls are incredibly tight, and the combat moves along at a decent pace. It's pretty easy to bust out some basic combos. What's really nice about it, though, is that the characters are incredibly varied, yet easy to pick up and play, due to the fact they generally rely on basic quarter circle motions. Better still, though, is that they have a surprisingly large moveset for each character. And you you know, the more I looked into this game, the more I was surprised by the things I found. Ends up different characters have different physical and magical defense. Overall, the game really comes together and is a very fun, solid fighter that I've greatly enjoyed. And heck, even the bad graphics start to grow on you after a while. They look sort of like an old Blizzard game, like Diablo or the original Warcraft. Except that this was 2004. It fits with the look, and hey, at least they're well animated. That said, while the core game is good, and if I reviewed it on its own, I'd undeniably give it a 4 out of 5, it's the port where the game kind of falters. It's not because the porting job was bad, it's because it's so damn bare bones. You've got arcade mode, online mode, training mode, and options. That's it. That's fucking it. You don't even have a versus mode. You have to join in the middle of arcade mode. Now, the online mode I cannot comment on, both because my internet connection sucks and because I live in America. Remember, this game was not intended to be played in America. Chances are the connection would be connecting to a server in Japan before bouncing back to America, and so of course it would be laggy, and reports have indeed confirmed this. However, I can't hold that against the game because we're not meant to be playing it online. Just fair word of warning. Also, I've heard that the online play only allows for 3-on-3 with one item, or 1-on-1 with 3 items, no mixed teams. But also, perhaps my biggest complaint would have to be the borders around the screen. I appreciate that they're using official art and the border changes sometimes. However, there's absolutely no way to get rid of them. You cannot stretch the screen to fit a widescreen TV. But worse yet, even when you're playing in standard definition, the borders are still there, squashing the screen and making it look strangely vertical. You might think that this was supposed to be the original arcade resolution, but I highly doubt that, as when playing in high definition on a widescreen TV, it looks like a standard resolution. So, I don't know what's going on here. But the worst part would have to be the price tag at 2,000 yen. That's about the equivalent of 20 bucks before getting into the markup. And this is where I have a real problem here. I can get much better ports of other fighters for 10 bucks, so why should I pay essentially the equivalent of 20 for such a basic port? And it's a shame too, because it really drags an otherwise great game down. And that's before getting into the freaking markup. I mean, you're gonna have to import your PSN points, and they're gonna cost even more than 20 bucks, and yeah. However, there's one last thing I have to comment on, indeed the problem with reviewing fighters. What do we do about infinites? Yes, there are infinites, they have been found, but do you hold this against the game? I mean, back when the game came out, we didn't know these infinites existed, so if we reviewed this game fresh, we wouldn't have known about them. And even still, all fighters, every single fucking fighter on the face of the planet has an infinite in it. Well, practically anyway. So, do you really hold it against the game? I don't think so. But regardless, with such a bare bones port and an insane price tag, it really drags the game down. As I said, if I were reviewing just the fighter as an arcade game, I'd give it a 4 out of 5, no problem. It does drag it down, though. I'm going to give it a 3.8 out of 5. Now, I guess the big question here is it going to come to America? Well, there was no US release of the arcade game, so they would have to either translate that or release it raw. There's nothing preventing them from releasing it in America other than that, and the fact that there's absolutely no interest in America. However, it is a download title, so it wouldn't be too hard to bring over since they wouldn't have to print actual copies. Hopefully this review will generate some interest, but if you want to take the plunge and download it off the Japanese PlayStation Network, well, you can use Google to find out how to make a Japanese PSN account. As for where to get the points, well, there's a number of different options. I use Gateway to Japan. Basically what you do here is you PayPal this guy, and the next chance he gets, he goes out, buys a PSN card, scratches off the card, and emails you the code on the back. And while he does include an ad with his emails, which kinda annoys me, he's been reliable and fast, getting me my codes in the same day. Now, here's where we run into the other problem. They only sell point cards in 1,000 and 3,000 yen denominations, and with the inevitable markup, you're gonna end up paying $40 for a $20 game that should have cost $10. Yeah, but you're going to have some cash left over. If you want my recommendation, though, well, I hear there's an interesting PSN action RPG that was recently released in Japan for 1,000 yen, so that'd be a good choice, except I haven't tried it, so I can't comment on it. If you're going for PS1 games, well, I'd recommend either Rakugaki Showtime if you want a weird-ass, dodgeball-ish, throw a smiley face around game that is hard to get elsewhere, or Gunner's Heaven, which is essentially a knockoff of Gunstar Heroes, but a good knockoff of one of the best games ever made, so it's pretty good. Just remember, these games are going to be in Japanese, so I wouldn't recommend any RPGs unless you're seriously hardcore, or if you want to play it safe, just pick up Einhander. Anyway, this is Gel, and you've been GameBabble. And I've got a Blonde's trophy. Fuck yeah. See ya.